Is there this? Oh, there's three.
Oh.
There you are.
Exciting.
We have all of these.
Hmm.
I don't even know if we still have all of these.
We don't.
Policies, yeah.
We don't. I mean, we've gone through that thing, so these don't apply anymore. There's a lot of different things we were doing. Really wasn't the policy stuff, but you didn't have anywhere else to go.
Right,
And so
right.
you had to have something to try to go off of.
Oh, this is great.
And Mount Anthony had the most,
Well,
and then Wolford had the next. And everybody
seems
else
a high.
Has the
really didn't have anything else.
This is a flashback to the other policy days, back when we used a typewriter.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that.
I had an old red binder. If I have it still.
Policies?
Yeah, it was a policy binder back in the days when I actually sat on this board.
Well, we are so.
Prior
glad-
to Leon's arrival on the board, actually.
Well, that one's gone 95 is when I
Yeah,
was,
something like that before that, yeah.
yeah.
It's a good circle.
Well, no, I was not on the board before 95. I was not on the board before about the early 2000s.
Oh, well, I was on the board and then I got the policy board committee. Yeah, and Jim Goodine says, when they was having all this uproar, he says, I'm leaving. Leon, you're gonna be on the policy committee and here's my book.
Oh, so you must have been on, and then you weren't on the board when I was doing it, except toward the end, you started coming against.
Oh, I don't.
Yeah,
Wow,
I
so
didn't leave the policy. once
yeah,
I
you
got
got
on
on
it.
but I didn't see you for many times. So
I am grateful that you're joining us.
it's just used to be Bruce Lee Clark used to come in occasionally.
Oh, yeah.
So we got the list of all the folks that were in here in terms of names. and so-
prior-
Whoops.
The prior rep from North Bennington was Terry Eric.
Yeah, that's right. There was Terry Eric. That's right.
I remember.
He was known as the grammarian, I guess, or something.
Yeah, yeah, it was Terry Eric.
That'd be
That's right.
Bruce.
And I supposedly took that chair, which
Legal.
is somewhat true.
Right.
That's right.
Ray Barnes was our grammar.
Remember, is that spot?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. It was Terry Eric here and then Eric left and I think that's when Ray.
I scooted a couple minutes. Does your backpack need a seat or can I sit next to you?
So the only, usually, Jim's right there and then, Cat TV and that's it. And we don't have Dina today. She was going to try to, yes, she was trying to join. She was finishing up something in Sunderland and was gonna try to hop on. But we can call through when she comes and if anything arises and she's not, we'll just write her question for.
Thank you. Well, it is 4:30 and it's time to open the policy drafting committee meeting. And we will start with public comment, and if I understand you correctly, there's no one waiting.
Correct.
So we'll move right on to the minutes of April 7th. We have an approval of the minutes.
So moved.
Second. I don't know if we need a second, do we?
It's a small,
It's a
under
small-
11,
Yeah.
you don't have to have it.
All those in favor, the approval of minutes? Aye.
I'm abstaining since.
Ray will abstain. I want to welcome Ray
Wasn't here.
as our North Bennington liaison person. So glad that you're joining us here today and in future meetings. It'd be great to have you back on the policy committee. We were talking earlier, how long has it been?
I don't know.
There've been a few moons. There've been a few moons. We're gonna start with policy 3101, mandatory drug and alcohol testing. That is a policy that we were working on before.
Can I give an update?
I was going to ask you if you would be kind enough to give us an update.
So after our last meeting, Dina Atwood, our attorney, shared the VISBIT model policy. And I went back to our Director of Human Resources, Nick Galt, and had him review both, and would like to recommend. Yeah.
You gotta give me permission to share.
Sorry. So, our Director of Human Resources, Nick Galt, is actually recommending that to this group to consider the VISBIT model policy because the language is current and up to date.
And in this bit policy, does it include any person who is transporting? Students, transporting students.
Waiting for Laura.
Well, she needs me to respond. I apologize. All I did was I went to our Director of Human Resources and said, could you please, because he reviewed our prior, I know we were struggling with our previous policy, partially because of how long it had been in place. And so when our attorney found the VISBIT, I actually just took that to our Director of Human Resources and said, our attorney's recommending this, could you please review? And I didn't get any further comment but that, so if you're all looking at it now and you have further questions, I can write them down, or if there's subtle changes you'd like to make to reflect what you're suggesting, Sandy. But the recommendation from both the attorney and, let's see if Dina jumps on, from the attorney and Human Resources is to at least take the model policy, but I hear you, should we add the piece about if there are employees that are driving? Correct, yeah, which is what we worked on this.
Right, and I thought that, I kind of wondered if that was one of the questions that we had for Human Resources Director. Nick had looked to see if the employees that were hired specifically for driving of a vehicle, or if they did it occasionally.
I think the recommendation, and I think it would be an admin regs, we talked about the procedure that's used in Arlington. That Arlington had a procedure that they used, and did we talk about possibly that would go in admin regs?
We were talking about that they did something different and
Yes.
that we are going to find out
Yes.
what they did so that we could line up with them.
Yes. So how about if we do this? What if you start with a conversation around this model policy?
Sure.
And then I can go back and ask that follow-up question.
Okay, so we'll put this on hold until our next committee meeting. And then we can compare this model with the VISBIT model. And then maybe we could even have it look like a model, like one of our policies.
Right, I didn't want to go through all that.
Yeah.
We were just gonna go now,
Yeah.
but yes, I will get it all prepped.
Does this committee believe that that's the direction we should head?
Well, if he's recommending that we take all and he can live better with the a model policy version uh, versus the other one, and it covers all the different things in there. So what we need to do is verify whether everything is in there versus the old one. I read the old one. I didn't read all of business. I did know our old one still had on the fourth page pound
Yeah,
of
yeah.
pound of stuff in there. Pay a fee to the Vermont bus company for them to do the drug testing and so forth.
I think that the first one on the model policy shares that any CDL driver who operates a school bus or commercial vehicle, but we have employees that are driving non-commercial, and that was our concern before. So I think that we need to add them for the safety of our students, that they're in there somewhere as part of this, as part of a policy that we move forward.
And that's right, when those, and then we asked, so what we got done particular people for the buses, but we have a teacher or para that's doing the
That's
driving.
driving.
The question was coming up about day testing,
Right.
and a lot of that, some part of it was into the contract with the teachers, a contract negotiations and some of them being able to do things. So.
Sure. Okay, so we will put it on hold.
Something's coming back to me in my conversation with our director of human resource. I think, and I think actually we accomplished what I was, the task, which was, we didn't want to move any farther. We only wanted to update either our old policy or this draft. And so you asked the question and said, would we be comfortable with Lisa now doing a mock-up and making this our draft? So that was a yes.
Yes.
And now that we've got that squared away, I will also have Nick Gall add that little language in there about if there's an employee driving.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
And then that's what will come back next time.
Perfect.
Okay.
And just so that we understand, this is not a situation where it's a occasional or an correct. Yeah, this is just somebody who is specifically driving on a day-to-day or
Correct.
regular basis.
Right. Yes.
Yep, thank you.
Is specified in paragraph 4, it's draft budget.
Are you looking at, yes, but now we're looking at this one from the Vermont School Board.
Yeah. I downloaded.
I think Lisa might have sent it
It's in the packet,
in the
on
packet.
on the website.
Well, that's what I should have.
That's where you can't get.
Get in here, we can't get on, just like.
Okay, here's this one.
Yes. Yeah, that's the one. So this is the one that we're going to look at for the next meeting.
Yep.
And determine that it meets all the pieces that we're hoping it does, which includes the people who are currently driving a non-CDL vehicle, so a regular vehicle, on a regular basis. This is not an emergency situation. This is something that they do as a regular part of their position.
Right.
Okay, so the next policy is policy 1018, school community relations. And other than it being, having to be updated with the header.
And all it, and then same gate.
Yes.
Is this 1018?
It is an 18. And this Leon, was with your list of policies that we wanted to review.
So you move them up.
And I'm not sure how, what it was that you were hoping for in this particular policy.
This was just brought forward as a general,
As a
could it be
general?
reviewed? Yeah,
Yeah.
just as a time to have it reviewed. There's nothing
Hasn't been looked at
yeah, in a
since
long time.
06.
And so I read through it and I thought it was an older one that we hadn't got to, but I didn't see anything. I personally, school, community relations in terms of the different things that we want to have in there. That's not in there, but things are in there. Well, I didn't bring a copy here, but I did read that.
Well, it seems like it has strikeouts of districts that no longer exist.
Right,
Right.
Yeah,
right,
Yeah.
and additions for those that do.
right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it gets Arlington, Sandgate.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
So if there is nothing on this that we want to change except for the heading, then we could send that to the boards.
Right. I'll move.
It would just go as an FYI.
As an FYI.
Okay, it does, because those are just school changes, so it doesn't need to be, warned and adopted.
Thank you.
Heading of the first paragraph, lines 6 and 8 and 9 and changes.
Yeah, all of that stuff.
It's just school names.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just pro forma.
But the only thing that you're talking about here is that we needed to be able to say when we did this, and that's what we're talking about. You know, it's an FYI. But because we didn't change the body and just only updated the header and those particular things, which we said we agreed to do, it's not going to
Good.
the board for a warning and all that stuff. It's just going to
No,
be the
you just-
documentation date for that.
You have a column for review date.
That's right.
You could
It's-
just put
And now,
dates in there.
yes.
Yes.
I was checking number 4, because we've updated a lot of technology, policies recently, and I just want to make sure 4 is all encompassing. Just because media is changing all the time.
Are you okay with the way it's written?
I think I am, yeah.
So
Mhm.
What's the last part?
Sorry.
Okay. So that will go as an FYI to the boards. Which brings us to, let's see. Policy 7205, board member conflict of interest.
So this is a required policy and the Vermont School Boards Association updated the model policy. And so this might be very similar to number 3. So Lisa will share the new updated language from the,
So you don't want to show this right now?
oh, do you want to start?
This one, that's the actual policy.
Right.
Right. Well, what is it in the school board conflict of interest policy that we don't have in our own? Okay.
The big change I think we've noticed this year is specifically just checking the definitions to make sure that that's a lot of the work they've been doing that we've then been doing.
Yeah. They have a lot more of the administrative responsibilities in that
Yes.
conflict of interest policy. I think we come back to the same conclusion that And it spells those things out down at what the board members shouldn't do. But then at the bottom, at the end, the board can't do anything if the board don't decide to. And if that board member decide not,
There's no penalty.
no penalty out there. That's the same thing that we already have in the other one, but
So that's because the law doesn't provide one,
right.
as I recall. Yep. It's it's policy adherence on your own recognizance.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose you always have the voters at the very end who remember.
So that, all of those things is the administrative procedure, so if they look at it and say, this is what we wanna change and be more specific, like the model policy, that could be added. If they wanted it to be added.
Is that what this committee is recommending?
Well, no, we won't, I mean, I won't, the administrative rate will look and say what it is, if I was as clear enough versus the one for the model policy, then there's no need to change, but that's up to the administrators to say, we want to be more detailed versus what we have over here, and they can just add that over as an FYI and be updated.
Well, the one thing I did notice in the model policy that we didn't have in ours was the use of shall instead of will. And I think that shall makes it a legal obligation, whereas will is just something that happens or could happen in the future. So that should probably be changed from will to shall if we're going to keep this required board member conflict of interest policy that we currently have, that we currently use. And that's a decision that we should decide if we're going to go with the model policy or if we're going to keep our policy, but perhaps,
So you're referring to in the implementation?
yes, yes.
Will not, and will not, and will not, and will not, and all of those bullet points.
Would become shall not, shall not, shall not.
Well, you could be more simple about it. You could just take the first sentence and say, in order to comply with the obligations, the board and its members shall adhere to the following recommended standards. I don't know that you need to go through because you don't have any enforcement power anyway.
That's right, you don't, but, that's what I'm saying, it just spells out thing, but you don't have any elected official, you don't have any power at the board.
Shall doesn't have a lot of impact if there's no
That's right.
possibility of enforcing it.
So are you suggesting that we should not move this forward or make any changes other than the date of it,
No, I'm just suggesting you put the shall in
the first?
first clause above the bullet points.
And if I understand you
Get out of
both
here.
correctly, that you would prefer to continue with the policy that we have over,
That's what I would,
I haven't seen the other policy, so I don't.
okay,
that's what I would prefer, because the only big difference is all the administrative regs. A page and a half versus a paragraph that we have. And it comes down to the same thing.
And
So,
okay, so we just have a paragraph on this.
so
right.
if we switch line 11, Lisa, from the
Mhm.
word will to shall, right after members. So let me ask all of you this, if we do not change that word, then it can be an FYI with the change of the schools and the dates.
Yeah.
And if we do change the word, then it becomes a full, needs to go through all the boards for approval. So do you have a preference, either any of you, for that?
Well, until the ability to do anything about it is remedied, I think you might as well just change the easy stuff. and leave it alone.
And Glenn and Leon, your,
I don't have a problem with that. But then it's not, if it needs to go back and say, hey, did we went from Will to Shell? That's that would be the only thing.
Now, is it possible for individual boards to stiffen the policy?
they would bring their feedback to you and you would bring it back to us and then we would,
Well, the only possible body to enforce any sanction or in some way would be the individual board, the person who serves them, right? But I still don't see how you do that. I mean, all you can do is have a discussion. I don't know if you do that in open session. I mean, you might consider it a personnel matter and do it in executive session. That, you're doing this and we don't want you doing it because it looks to us like it violates conflict of interest.
in the administrative policies, it shares exactly what you just said, that there is no legal issue either way, just that board members should walk away. So
Under the complaints section, I see. Board members may discuss conflict of interest concerns.
mhm.
It's the member's decision that controls whether a member participates. So the member has to recuse himself, so all you're left with is, remonstration. Yeah, and hopefully that works, but may not. And you're left, you have no recourse really.
So both of you have served on the board for a number of years. How many times have you had a situation where you felt that this was an issue? Don't give me examples, just.
No, I think-
Well,
One time.
I can tell you that I have on occasion done small pieces of work for the school when we were an operating district. And I just noted in public session that I was doing these. I got paid small sums. I wasn't getting paid like full rate. But I was getting reimbursed for materials and maybe some of my time. So I would note that and I wouldn't vote on the award.
Leon, how many times do you remember having this situation where it was a possible conflict?
Well, when we were getting hard.
Don't give me examples.
They're saying it's something along that line. They just decided to leave and stop in terms of being in a conflict. That's all.
Yeah.
I don't see anything that, I mean, the policy that, were they both saying basically the same thing. The only thing is the administrative regs and the model policy just goes into a lot more scenarios and things than I think that we really need. Based on the outcome of what we can actually do.
So from your experience, it seems, if I understand all of you, that it would be better for us to leave the policy as it is and update the schools and the date that we're sending this forward. Is that correct?
That's what I did.
And it's up to you all, because if we're changing one word,
Yeah, we're gonna not change the one word
we're not gonna change it
We're
to
not-
shall.
I don't think it matters.
because we don't feel that it'll,
Oh.
for the number of times it would have to go through the boards.
Yep.
It's not a word.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, the one word I could probably check with Dina to see if it was necessary. To have it
I
worded
don't
and
think it's
adopted.
necessary because it doesn't control the wills and all the rest of the documents below it.
Right.
It just says you shall you shall follow these rules, but then the rules themselves are not very, they don't say shall, they say will.
Okay, so we will leave it as is and it'll just FYI that we've added the other member districts.
Yes. Thank you. Okay, so we are moving on to the policy on policies, policy 1000, policy, which is, it says policy on policies, but the title
It's
is
policy
policy drafting
drafting.
committee.
Yes.
Yes. And that just seems to need changes. In addition of Arlington and Sandgate, is that what it is?
We added them on.
Well,
Or is that already in there that they've been added in? Yeah.
I guess I wanted to know about this policy a little bit, because I was hoping Dina would be here to answer all questions, but the, statute 563, which shares that there has to be a public notice of a policy 10 days prior to adopting a policy. And whether that means that, is that 10 days prior to the first time it goes to the,
No, it's adoption.
so in the adoption, so my second question is, as you're thinking that line, do we need to send a policy through as both a warning and an adoption? Can we send it through and have it go into effect if there are no concerns from any of the boards in one sweep instead of two? So that instead of,
Well, but the policy goes back to the SU board
yes,
after other boards have approved it.
yes,
So you've got warnings all over the place.
yes,
Plenty of warnings.
yes.
That's the process that we go through to gather information from the public and the other boards that this is what we are about to discuss. This is what we are discussing. And it gives them a chance to look at it and give us real feedback before we put a stamp on it and say, this is really the policy. And then we won't have to be trying to go back and do things that we could have discussed in the process of warning.
So my question is, if we are sending it out and we hear nothing, and then it comes back to us and nothing has been done, so we send it out again, rather than doing that, is there a way that we could add to this policy drafting committee procedure that if there are no issues, that it automatically becomes a policy or in place?
I've never had anyone ask that question that way and so forth, so that would be for
You're trying to,
eliminate a
what
step.
do you think you're going to say
Time.
here? How much time do you think? you
But
say?
we have, the warning process has to happen, so people have a chance to respond.
Right.
Right, which they do.
And sometimes the policy, you all as a committee wouldn't know if there were any questions or changes until it comes back to the policy committee after that warning period.
Right. If it goes to all the boards and warning and the public and everybody else can see it come back.
Mhm.
Now we say, okay, we're going to go through the 10-day process of adoption.
So the rationale in my mind is the policy that Glenn and I started last summer that took 10 months for it to get through all of the committees and become actually a policy.
10 months?
Yeah.
Is that,
That's
Superintendent's the policy on the evaluation of the superintendent of schools.
we've had them to take 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
So much time. Being honest, you from 10 months.
Yeah,
It's
so,
2 to 3 years.
We have since that's the express train.
and
Okay.
it's, so I
I
was,
mean, this has been, the whole time I was on the policy committee before, this was a big issue.
Yes.
And we wriggled and tortured ourselves and we haven't solved it yet.
Which is why I'm asking again, is so that.
Well, I
we-
mean, if you think about what the legislature does, with a bill, it goes through, it gets 3 readings in the main assembly, as well as going through committee, a number of committees, depending on where it gets shunted off to.
How are they doing?
before-
But and honestly, I don't see any reason to try to shorten this up, the process. From the wanting versus the adoption process. We need to have, that set amount of, times or indicates, and so that the people can really have a chance to do something. And even when it wind up being adopted, if there is something fundamentally wrong, it'll still come back and get corrected. But by legal process is what we're doing.
But first, you have to remember that there are legislatively determined policies
Mhm.
that we cannot really deviate from.
Right.
Can we do those in a more effective way?
We've done
So
that.
the required,
We've done that when they sent something to us and says, hey, look, you gotta have this in by that date. We fast tracked it
Mhm.
and made sure, but it was still put up, so we took care of a 10-day period.
but if I understand you correctly, on the required policies, you're suggesting, Ray, that we
If it's completely legally determined by the state,
state that we perhaps on those
I
policies.
think those are pro forma. You put them into the fray to be sent around to the boards, but it's like there's no choice.
But they never, I mean, when we get policies from the Vermont School Board Association.
Well,
and
that's
say
a different
this-
thing. I'm talking about legislative determined policies that are written and basically they're just the text from in the law statute.
I don't know that I've ever seen any,
Well,
they
there's
have
some.
phrase, but they don't have a full blown out policy. See, and that the sightings
There's
that we
some of
have in there.
There are some of them that are definitely you just pass what's been passed by the legislature. But it's not all of them. I know that. It's just. And I can't point to one at the moment, but.
Well,
The harassment.
The harassment
Yeah.
policies are that way.
Harassment and bullying policy was that way.
Harassment
And
and
when we sent it
bullying.
around, we said, look, this is what the state says, and
And there's no
Can't
reason
change
to change it.
That's right.
Because you're just inviting potential legal attention.
But that's not a full policy. That's just a portion of that. That's what I'm saying. That they say, this is what you gotta do. And all the rest of the stuff is what this board should be doing in terms of, making things available to the,
Okay, what's all the rest of it?
uh,
The notice and warning?
that and the administrative regs part in terms of how we interpret and how we.
Administrative regs are another item, right? And we don't send those around and approve them throughout the whole, every district, do we?
They're not tied to the policy, but they're,
Right.
they're
Yeah.
there.
That's
And I'm
right.
just, that's true, and how we interpret that. But, it's true that we have legislated stuff that are out here. And it may be, and I don't know that we have always agreed 100% with something and then had to go back and do the process. Of asking them to make a change because something was fundamentally wrong in that legislative piece that they came. That's where we go, when the school board takes a look at it and they said, look, something ain't right here. And it tries to work on that before it get to us
Hmm.
to massage it off. So
You're
it don't.
talking about the
come
school
back.
board association talking to the legislature.
That's right.
Right.
on the required policies.
On the required policies to make sure that the references, the sightings are referenced down there. But what it is that they really wanna acquire, be done, it gets massaged at the school board level. And then they send it to us and say, this is really what they're talking about. And then legally, here's the citing to go back to the legislative documents to do that.
So for the purpose of our policies, 10 days public notice is what we need before policy can go in, be implemented. Then 10 days of public notice
Do we
prior
need
to adoption.
10 days when it's a legislatively written and determined policy that we have to put in place?
It's a Vermont law that mandates it.
Where's,
VSA 563.
after they've done all this work and put out a policy that
Mhm.
we have to
It's part of-
put into the policy, man?
Yeah, it's part of the power of the school boards in the
Let me
VSA.
see that.
It's this one here. So,
Well,
Click in
that's
here.
not it.
well, no, that's not actually the policy, that's the reference. It's right here.
Yeah, I know the list of powers of school boards,
What you want,
but I think that is a power that is superseded when the policy is actually written by the legislature, passed by the legislature and signed by the governor.
It's quite possible that it is viewed that way. It isn't written that way. So I understand what you're saying, and I absolutely appreciate that you're bringing it
I
up.
think I'd agree with you that the board has to adopt it, but I think it's pro forma. I don't think you actually have to warn it because it's been warned by the legislature.
Okay, so
I think Dina should tell us that.
and so it sounds like what you're saying, the 16 VSA and require each school board to establish policies and procedures
Yes.
designed to avoid
Right,
the
but-
appearance of a conflict of interest.
But
But then this is a
we
requirement.
are a creature of the state. It's a Dillon's rule state. So if the state has already said exactly what they want you to say, then you just do it.
okay, so let's circle back
You
around.
can't, let me put it this way. If we send it around to the boards and the boards want changes to it, what are you gonna do about that?
Nothing.
Well,
That's right.
And the requirement.
That's my point.
it's limited though for what you got. You're trying to make it in layman's terms so that all the people can understand that. The sightings, like, here's
Oh,
a.
no, they've written it the way they want it to be understood.
Yes, but it comes to us in the form of a one word or line with a reference back to the document of the legislature. And so I have 4 references here. One on gratuity conversation prohibited, another one on eligibility for election of school boards, public bid, and power
So-
of the school board.
So
All
you're
those
saying
came
we're
through.
going to put this in layman's language.
And
Is what
that's,
you're saying.
and that's why they.
In which case there is interpretation that has to be
Right.
dealt with.
And the legal references for that policy
Will be in there.
just happened to be that last one was also part of the policy committee. We also cross-referenced to that, which is why
Yeah.
I brought it up. If we can go back to the beginning of this policy drafting committee document, there were a few things that both of you as longstanding members might be able to help with, and one of
No,
them.
I'm a newbie now. so-
Yes, you're a newbie. But one of them is board representatives from each district, because if we're
Yeah.
going to have an adoption process, do we change that or leave it as is? Do we have 2? Do we number it? Do we not number it? Yeah.
Look at which piece where.
Right under the B, right from the very beginning.
Okay, that paragraph.
Yes.
Okay, well. Again, this only applies if you're actually going to change language from the state. in order to make it, to clarify it
Well,
for,
this one is actually ours. I don't think this is
Yeah.
a required policy.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't think so. It's not on my.
Well, this is our process. here.
Right, so my question to you is, how many members should this committee have to serve our
Well, in the opening statement, it don't say, it just says each,
That's right.
that each
I think-
board.
I think
district
you have to have at
community
least one
represented.
from each board, but I don't think you need to have more.
And
But anybody can come and
Right.
participate.
as a community, well, then it
We
also
have community
asks
volunteers.
for community volunteers. So
Yeah.
we have a part where we can have public comment in the beginning.
Yep.
That I believe is different from a community volunteer who sits on a regular
Yes.
basis.
Right.
And
That's what we've done.
so my question
We
to
used to
you,
have community volunteers, people who would sit here all the time, most of the time, yeah.
I remember there was a time when we would have administration.
Yeah.
Sitting as well.
Yeah.
But my question is,
You'd have administration for that.
yes, we do, yes, we do. So my question is, do
They
we
may
need to
not be
change that?
contributing at the moment, but they're here.
Oh, my goodness, if you looked at, Laura's minutes from the last minute, she is more than contributing, she has
Yeah.
the most beautiful minutes.
So, but the paragraph is, follow that, the working document will be placed on each district board agenda in one. It says comments from the board or the administrators shall be forwarded to the policy drafting committee.
Mhm.
Now, what's in here and inherent, we do not work alone
Correct,
in this. The boards don't work alone. We
Correct.
work in a symbiotic relationship with administrators
Mhm.
to make sure that this process flows the way we want it to flow out here, to get it into place, get it documented, Lisa, get it into wherever it needs to go and so forth and manage it. Without that, and we don't really talk about all of that in here, but it just address, saying the district and community members. And that's basically it, but we can't just do all, I don't know of any policy committee that acts totally separate from the.
I don't think I'm
administrative.
asking that, I
No.
think I'm, remembering the days when they were actually with us, when we
Right.
were having the discussion. And I thought that that helped in the respect that it gave us input from schools, immediate input.
Well, but-
Not sending it out and having it come back.
The word is immediate there. But what's happened over time, and Laura, they got much more efficient with saying, let me get this and let the administrators and teachers and so forth work on a bunch of these things during the summer break or somewhere else, provide input, and we have all that coming to us at the beginning of the year to massage in and work in. That's the difference between having an individual board member, administrator sitting here, if they.
And sadly, our superintendent and assistant superintendent will both be leaving us.
Yeah.
So that consistency may not be the same.
So.
You really mean sadly?
Yes, I do. I do.
Where are you?
So.
Yeah,
Well, we
okay,
can
so,
change-
so let me say this. It seems to me that we have at least two classes of documents. One are documents that the legislature in its wisdom has passed and they expect that to be the policy.
Be put into a policy format.
Well, yes, but I mean, it's, the language is going to be what they pass. We put it into our particular format, but we're not actually changing any substance of the policy.
And if I understand Leon correctly, we have sometimes changed the wording because the required policy.
Cannot be interpreted legally by the average person out here. So that's where we get into a policy and we get into administrative regs part of that. that we have to do, because everybody, that brother and sister just cannot do legal interpretations and understand exactly what's needs to happen. So the step that we take is very important to make sure that that happens with whatever is being handed down to us.
I'm not really certain of that myself.
It's our
Right.
intent.
I'm just thinking, if you've got certain things that are basically word for word, leave them that way. You can use your administrative regulations to, expound on them a little bit. But you can pass the policies, you can speed up the process of getting the policy established in your policy book. And let the administrative regs interpret in a way that explicates it for the general public as well as board members.
I mean, if you want to write that in and put that in that way, and that if for some reason these things are so defined where the common person can understand it, then we can pass it on that particular way. I mean, if we want to state that in our policy on policy, but I'm saying
Is that a difficult, I see the look on your face and I'm wondering, is that a difficult, determination?
I'm thinking it is, because I hate to say it, but there are legislative information that being provided is so far away from the average person that
I
we
definitely
need to
agree.
be able to do that. And that's when we take and cite what their intent,
Yeah.
what it is by law, and saying this is what they want. But here's really how we're gonna manage it, and this is what it really means at this level, so that everybody can understand what it is.
Okay, but
all the way down
you know,
through the school
that,
system.
that is going to take some finesse, and you're going to have to involve the district attorney.
Yeah.
The district's attorney, not the district attorney. And in order to make sure that the language you put out there for the public is going to be, is not going to get the points of law distorted.
Right, that's exactly right.
Right. And so that's going to take longer.
In this policy, it does share that it does get a review of the SVSU attorneys. So no matter what we write,
Right.
there is a final
Yeah.
review.
But, that's not necessary if you're just taking language from the legislature, of course.
I don't want to get myself in trouble.
We're trying to come up with a simpler way of doing it.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah.
that's exactly
Faster
right.
way of getting it through multiple boards.
Well, if you look at some of our, but like this one, the last time we looked at it was in 11.
Yeah.
It was 2011. So it seems like one, the other one that we were looking at, not this one. Lisa.
Okay.
Sorry. Board member conflict.
But when you look at that, again, what we didn't do until we just in recent years started to add another sheet to say we reviewed these things. We looked at them and made, if we didn't make any changes, we didn't make any documentation, but they got looked at. So those notes that were down there from way back that says this was 2011 may not be accurate, because we didn't have a process in place to show that we had updated them. And that's when we changed the body and started adding on. I don't know, we should have referenced down when we added the rest of the columns to showing that we reviewed these, but we didn't take any action. We just reviewed them. And it wasn't necessary to make any changes to go around to the boards and so forth. And we have a record of that, because everybody was coming back and saying, well, this hadn't been 2011, 2009.
needs to then.
And I'm saying, well, wait a minute.
Yeah.
That's not really the case. And so we formatted and put this process in place to disclaim that. I mean, to document our work. And we hadn't got around to doing everything in that process yet.
So if I understand, Lisa updates this after it has gone through the FYI? Is that true? Okay, so,
So,
I mean, when it goes, if we're just looking at this like right now, I will add the review date as it goes out as an FYI.
okay,
And now, and they won't come back and say, hey, you didn't look at this since,
yes.
10 years or 20 years. But that's not the case.
Um,
okay, well, that's a matter of who does that? Who keeps the record, that record? Does Lisa do that?
And it goes on the website that way.
Yeah. But isn't the process then that okay, so there are basically two types of policies, maybe? Policies that are legislatively driven and policies that are driven by schools and the SVSU to deal with particular
well,
circumstances.
there are required and recommended,
Yeah,
and it's the required, the ones that
who
you.
requires them? The state
The state.
That's vague.
or well, the school board association provides you some
Recommended,
recommended policies.
yes.
And those are recommended interpretations of the required policies plus
No,
other policies.
No, they're separate.
Legislative document, and
Yeah.
because I mean, we use the word policy. The legislators don't write the policies per se. They do a legislative document for the interpretation of what should happen. The policy format of that piece comes through the agency in terms of Department of Education and then come down to the school boards. We've jumped the gun a lot of the times and said, well, what are they looking at? They're looking at class size and they may throw some numbers out there somewhere, just they're using that as an example. But then that has been worked through all that other sections out here. But that's a concrete piece that will say, if they're saying the class size need to be before, be less than 9 or less than 9 students or 10, whatever the number may be. And we get that, and we can't live with that particular legislative document. There has to be a working document around and how we interpret managing that particular situation with the legislative wheel out here without creating.
Yeah, well, that,
So,
you're kind of jumping ahead to
well,
what
we
may
have,
be coming at us here.
really, hopefully not. So we have required, we have recommended, and then we have policies to consider. A list from the School Board Association, which is what this is, which
Those aren't those are separate.
this is
recommended.
separate. This is something that came from the School Board Association,
Mhm.
where they say that we're required to have these.
Mhm.
These are recommended, and these are something to consider. And one of them is the adoption of policies, which I just looked at.
Which is the policy we've been talking about.
But you can have more, and that's what we used to have more. Because we
So
want
how
to
much-
manage the district need to be managed.
Well, and the
So-
process, I think, should be managed, and that is why I suggested that we, instead of having it go around twice, should we consider having it go around once? And if nothing has come out of any of those boards, that it would perhaps go back to the SU board for that final, this has been around, there are no objections, it's now.
I guess you could answer that questions to the legal, but I'm for consistency.
You're what?
I'm for being consistent. I want everybody to know how this school operates on a continuous basis. There's no is and out about it. We're gonna warn and we're gonna adopt and so forth along that line. And then, we're gonna, regardless if we have to type it all over the same thing in a document, but we're gonna put it through that process.
So
And that's
this,
the kind of,
this is what we used to do.
Right.
And this is what we do.
okay, well, I'm
This
saying
is
that
what
me.
we-
Yeah, and this is what I'm saying, but I'm for, to be consistent with what we do when it comes to the educational process of going from one district to the next, and then everybody know how we do things.
Well, you're right.
So
So-
I'm going to ask that everyone here look at this policy again and compare it to what is on the School Board Association, as well as this policy, the rule and adoption of school board policies, so that we can really look at this and consider, is this something that we could move a little bit faster and be more efficient, so that we might be able to get through more of our policies. Is that something that we could agree on?
Like, we can look, I mean, you're saying you're gonna ask, oh, we're not gonna, the question that came up, are we gonna violate something? And we wanted to have the attorney give us
Feedback, but
feedback on
also,
that. If not, then we can go to the second phase of what you're talking about.
okay,
Along that line,
okay,
and so in the sake of, the expediency,
I
okay,
already made a note.
thank you.
Well, how much are we getting charged for policy reviews?
She's typically
yeah, but
here
I'm
with us,
trying-
so,
You're doing it at the,
Well,
well, she's being paid hourly.
yes, but we only request that
Oh.
input and so forth. These
Oh.
things are so important, some of them, and we ask that we have attorney to help us be here with the interpretation of some of those things.
Well, I think there's a lot of cooks making this broth. That's always been the case. So.
right now we have 4 cooks looking at this broth and determining what vegetables to put into it. And that's
That's usually the problem.
Well, we're supposed to have more, but we don't have them, but keep us going.
Well, I mean, if we actually had more input from public, we'd have more.
so if you go
more
back,
issues.
I want you to think about that, Ray, because that is one of the considerations as to who and how many people should be on this committee. And how do they get here? Is it, are they volunteering? Are they being recommended by the school board that they sit on? How are they getting here? So that's a great piece for us to consider in the next meeting. This next policy, policy 5265, is educational files and records, FERPA. And I have to say that when I started looking through it, I absolutely remember that at the beginning of the year, every year.
Well, I have,
Here.
I have the feedback that you're supposed to review we had public comments on, December 2nd. And the request was to hold that community member's question for this review. So when you're ready, I'll read what their question was from the public member.
Thank you. I think that we are ready for that.
So Lori, Mulhern joined us and, she reviewed that this committee, reviewed this policy through the lens of, it's a very specific part, I think it's on the second part where it's about a note. When a child is sick, that includes the illness name. When a child is sick, that includes, when the request is that the doctor has to include the illness's name, she was suggesting that we were putting the student's personal information at risk. So we have somewhere, there's a little, I don't have it right in front of me because I zoom up, but, there's a reference early on in the policy about needing a doctor's note. It might be under, where we have the definitions of excused and unexcused possibly. She was asking specifically around if we needed to have, if there has to be the name of the illness, or if that could be removed, if the doctor could just have a, because, there are concerns around that.
And my question to you is, would that go into a health file and not the educational file?
Okay.
That's my question.
Mhm.
Because then it wouldn't fall into this.
Correct, so I can just speak, the nurses have electronic, they have something called SNAP, which is their electronic recording system, so that's where that piece, again, I think Lori's question, you can provide, direction for if you would like the nurses to take a further look at this and make a recommendation to this group.
But that's not considered an educational record, that's the health record, correct?
The SNAP.
There's two separate.
Yeah, it's like it's taking me a while it's their medical law, which is
Yeah.
different than Infinite Campus, which is
Right.
our student information system, correct?
So I don't think that, if I understand this correctly,
Mhm.
I don't believe it would fall under this piece, under
Okay.
this policy.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm just asking for that clarification.
So, Sandy, can you just restate, you would, the request of this group right here is to have the nurses take a look, and I would say our attorney both, at that little section that requests the actual name of the illness, to just say, can we take that piece out? Is this what I'm hearing? Take that piece off,
No.
leave it on, because it will be listed in
In the
the
health record and
Okay.
not in the educational
personal
file.
file.
Yeah, maybe, and I don't know this to be true, maybe Lori doesn't know perhaps that there are two separate files? One is specific to education and one's specific to healthcare?
Yeah.
And I can't answer that, I don't know if you.
Okay.
So I appreciate that you brought it up to us, because now we can review it. Unless there is something that you all think needs to be different in this policy. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought we were having an easy day.
No. Sorry, Ray.
Would any IEP records have health information, Laura?
It's also, I mean, it may be like in the, if you look at the big picture, like when they're doing the evaluation, there might be some notation
Mhm.
around that piece, but that,
But that's segregated from these other educational records that are referred to in this.
I could check, yes. Which letter, are you looking at a specific number on there? Or just in general? You're saying in general?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, this refers exclusively to students' educational learning.
So Laura, could you again just refresh
And directly.
her concern so that we're,
Yeah, and you know what? I just looked at the notes and I think we have confusion. We might have listed the wrong one. She's listed in the attendance policy 503.
got it. Okay, so that
Which now makes more sense, but
All
okay,
right,
good.
look at,
That's
that's
fine.
right. You're absolutely right. Good, good, good. Okay,
But
So,
this-
go ahead, yeah.
I was gonna say, this is a good piece to say, if you look at item 2 to it. There is directive to inform at least annually parents and eligible students of their rights. Under this policy regulation, which implements the family and so forth along that line.
yeah.
But then if you look at the dates of our policy. And you're saying, when did we adopt all those things? Year 2000.
Right,
And I'm saying, if we don't make any changes, and which we're not making any changes, just a directive in here that says, do this every year annually. But if something come up, then we go through this other process in here.
I'm pretty sure that that's a law that, I can't tell you how many different times that I have remembered Laura talking about
Yeah.
the first day or the first week of school and ensuring that those pieces, those documentations are out for the open houses and available. And a lot of times she's even there as.
Right, but this policy don't reflect that there have been any changes since 2002.
I don't think we need to.
And don't
Yeah,
need
but
to.
that's the
Yeah.
policy, that's not the provision of this form.
Other than, of course, the
Right.
schools.
And you assume that those, I mean, that particular provision is followed by in enrollment,
I-
basically.
I'm pretty sure that it's grant tied, so I think it's sensitive.
Yeah, it's for us super important, like as you know, Sandy referenced, you know, we make sure that all staff are trained every year, and receive I appreciate the reminder every year. And then, the information that we share out with families, in writing, and then also, as Sandy said at our title meetings, we have to provide this information as well. Because you all have the policy in front of you, my only wonder, since we have this policy up, is just around accessibility. We've been really conscious about language accessibility and making sure that it's shared, and so I'm just hoping that,
Was shared in a language of
correct,
parents,
yes.
first language.
Oh, first language, English language or whatever
Yeah.
language that comes out now.
And you do not create a directory anymore on that first line. Do you remember the days when directories were?
Close the directory of.
It looked like this, actually.
Yeah. Every town
Okay, yeah.
got it and reviewed it. And it had the people who lived in the town's names, addresses, et cetera.
Oh, I was thinking of like a staff directory or something
Oh,
along that line.
That's too much, but yes.
We have that online. There's a staff
yeah,
directory.
With like,
for each schools. It says.
yes, but not with an email, but not a telephone number.
No,
No.
Yeah.
no.
It used to be,
yeah.
Getting away from that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So things like vaccine records are kept separately in the health file for the individuals.
Is separate from the educational records.
Yeah.
So no changes to purpose.
So I see that, other than the schools, the changes of the schools, there are no changes.
Okay.
To this.
We'll add the attendance.
We'll kind of call it a review.
Yeah, and we'll call the we'll put the attendance policy down below with Lori's note.
Check it out.
Thank you. And we'll add that to the next.
Yep.
meeting. Okay. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
All right. We are down to what's this FYI, computer network and internet acceptable use, admin regs. Yes, which is an FYI, which means that something got changed,
Added.
added,
All that yellow stuff there.
yes.
Yes. All that yellow stuff.
The color changed.
It's bright and sunny. Do you want to look at it closely?
I kind of skimmed it when I
Okay.
was looking on my computer,
Okay.
but I shut it off there. So.
And the fixed asset policy. Same thing, admin regs.
Yeah, and that's just a very, very simple, each year, well, or annually, they, the threshold for purchases, that's the only thing that
The
changed in it,
increase to
Yeah, the increase,
to
we
10,000.
did a vote on the boards, I think, or somewhere along that line. To agree to do that, and this is just now catching up.
Why did I think it was 40,000?
It depends on the item.
Thank you.
Where did it go?
Cause I thought that was in statute.
That's the
Well, they have it.
threshold for
Accounting came back
the county.
and asked us to vote on those, a lot of the limits or whatever. Those are some things that,
Yeah, this is material requirement about whether it actually affects financial statements to.
Yeah.
And whether they have to depreciate it. That's the other thing.
Well, open, not opened.
So for future considerations, we will have the attendance. We'll go back on the policy of policies to take a look at that again. Please be sure to look over at the other references so that we can discuss whether or not we should have additional members or how, if we do have community members or people that would like to present policies to be considered. How is it that we bring that forward? And the mandatory drug and alcohol testing, we will return to that again in our next meeting. Great. Thank you all for your time. I really appreciate it.
tracking sheet was down. It's just-
The tracking sheet is there. Did you want to say something about that?
No, you got it down here. I'm just saying that's. People, this is how we keep track of where we're going, with things.
So, it is time now for us to end our meeting. Motion to adjourn.
Ooh.
Second.
Thanks. All in favor? Yay. So we'll have a meeting in June, but probably not July.
Not July, not August.
Not July, not August. All right, thank you. Jim, you're gonna miss us, but there is a spot for community members.
Yeah, I don't think so. But I have some suggestions for you. All right, have a good